Hello.
Hello.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yeah, hello, Søren. Yeah, I'm doing fine. How are you? Where are you from?
Excellent, I'm
Where
good.
are you at right now?
I'm in my home, totally isolated from the coronavirus in Denmark. So it's great that we can do this online. It looks like it's going really well for you guys. It looks amazing when I'm looking at it on the
Yeah.
screen. So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Well, thank you, and we're glad for having you here. So you're going to talk about Ucommerce, obviously. I mean, Søren and Ucommerce is one. Um, yeah. Do I have to mention anything else? I think maybe an interesting question, because obviously we're talking about Ucommerce right now as if it's some given that Ucommerce is around. Can you give us a very brief overview of how Ucommerce started? So when did Ucommerce enter the market? What is Ucommerce
Yeah,
for the
sure.
newer viewers?
So the package talk that you just completed is actually very interesting to me because Ucommerce is obviously a package for Umbraco that has been around since, gosh, we started developing it back in 2008. So Ucommerce has really been a staple of the Umbraco ecosystem all the way back from, I guess, Umbraco 3, something like that. So we've been around. We've been doing e-commerce and trying to push the boundaries on what's possible with e-commerce on Umbraco. And I have to say, we've seen a lot of CMSs out there, and Umbraco is really, easy to work with. It's fast. It's just a joy to be part of this ecosystem, and seeing an initiative like the one you're pulling off right now is just mind blowing.
Oh, thank you. I think it's just time to give you the floor and let you do your talk. We'll gather the questions for you during your talk, so at the end we'll do a Q&A, and you don't have to mind the chat during that.
I will mind my webcam there.
Your talk only.
Yes.
All right.
All right, so let me share my screen for you so you can see what I'm looking at here. There we go. Do you see some
Yes,
slides
we
maybe?
have screen.
Excellent. Good. Alrighty, so what we're looking at today is Ucommerce 9 that we released back in April. We've released a few versions of Ucommerce since then, but it's quite interesting with what we've done with the latest version, if I do say so myself. And some of the things that we've learned, I'm going to share with you from our partner network, which of course is largely based on Umbraco partners. So, but before I do that, let me just talk a little bit about where we came from to elaborate a little bit on the previous question you had, Leonard. So Ucommerce was really born out of our own need for an e-commerce platform. So I spent 10 years in doing consultancy work, building e-commerce solutions, and we spent a lot of time gluing content and commerce together. And at some point, it just got a little ridiculous doing it over and over again with different platforms. So we decided, why not build our own? And as a developer, we tend to scratch our own itch, and that's exactly what we did with Ucommerce. And fun fact, I knew Niels back then. So when we started building it and integrating with Umbraco, I wrote to Niels very quickly and asked, well, we're doing this e-commerce thing. Would that be interesting to the Umbraco community maybe? He was very excited about it and invited us to talk to Code Garden. So I actually had the pleasure with my partner to launch Ucommerce at Code Garden in 2009 in Copenhagen. So it's still one of the things that's really sort of a major high point in my career, because it was just so amazing to see the response we got at Code Garden. So it's really good. But since then, we've basically just focused on doing nothing but commerce and integrating that with Umbraco to create sort of this nice experience for digital merchants, so they can build out more than just putting virtual goods on digital shelves. Really using Umbraco to drive the presentation of the digital store. Now, I'm a developer at heart, and so basically the other thing that I wanted to do with the platform was to make sure that we create a really awesome development tool, because e-commerce is quite interesting when you look at the surface of it, because every e-commerce solution looks kind of the same, right? There's an add button, there's a price over here, there's some product pictures and things like that. But the most wonderful thing happens when you start to scratch the surface a little bit, and that is that every e-commerce solution turns out to be a bit of a snowflake. So they're all different, basically, which is what actually sort of drew me into e-commerce 20 years ago when I started my career. So the other thing we wanted to do with Ucommerce was to make sure that we build a platform that does not hold you back, exactly like Umbraco, right? Because what I really love about Umbraco is the fact that you can take Umbraco and you can basically turn it into anything you want. You can turn it into a CMS, you can turn it into an information repository, you can build all sorts of wonderful systems on top of Umbraco because it's so well thought out. And we wanted to do the same thing with Ucommerce to make sure that, if we ship a platform that doesn't necessarily make sense with all the capabilities we have, just create a foundation on which you can build and change. And so we actually employed very early on, before it was even sort of a thing, dependency injection and injection containers and all that good stuff, solid principles to create sort of a box of Legos almost that you can put together however you want at the end of the day. So replace price engines, all that good stuff. So, and this is really one of the things that we find with our partners that we work with, that they really enjoy. They can get in there and change the business logic and the UIs and everything basically of the platform. But at the end of the day, it's really about building websites like this. And I actually thought today, now that I had the opportunity to show somebody this almost in person, I figured I would actually show you something that we've been working on for a while that we're just about ready to release. And it's the new version of Avenue Clothing, which is basically our demo experience on top of Ucommerce. So it brings together Umbraco and Ucommerce into one experience, so you can see, what it might look like. So let me just show you that little demo real quick. So this is the live website this is the UAT website of Avenue Clothing. So everybody cross your fingers. We hope it's going to work. But the idea is that when you look at a website like this, Umbraco drives everything, right? All the presentation, everything is exactly the way that you're used to. You build out your controllers and your layouts and everything that in the way that you know. And then Ucommerce layers in additional information like catalogs and categories and products and things like that. So it's really easy to get started with this, and also the flexibility, of course, being what it is, that you can actually get in and create an experience that makes sense for your customer with faceted navigation and all that. And you don't have to work it all out from the beginning, because Avenue Clothing, we see that working quite often as a sort of a foundation, which our partners build on. So checking out and all that is just Umbraco driving all of it, with Ucommerce supporting it with our commerce APIs, basically. So that's just something we're working on. We're releasing that very, very soon. It's going through quality assurance at the moment, so maybe within a week or something like that. But it's just one example. We have so many wonderful examples of how Ucommerce is used and Umbraco as well. And it's really one of the things that I love about doing software is that we build a piece of software for somebody to use, and we have sort of a use case in mind. But then, we see developers taking this piece of software and just turning it into all sorts of interesting things. And it's just a joy to see how people are super creative with the stuff we put out there. So I think that's sort of one of the things that really bring me joy in my day-to-day life. But the general idea behind what we're doing here is that we have Umbraco here on one side and Ucommerce on the other side, and they sort of go together to create that website experience we just looked at. But one of the things that we realized over time is that we can actually use Umbraco much more than what we originally envisioned, because Umbraco has the ability to set up websites, of course, over here, and Ucommerce has the ability to set up stores and on multiple instances of those. So actually, what we found over the years is that partners tend to use the platform to build out sort of multi-channel solutions using this multi-channel foundation, which is really just a name for Umbraco being able to do what it does with multiple websites, and Ucommerce to doing what it does with stores. And let me just show you real quick some examples. So Rosendahl here is an interesting one where they have multiple Umbraco websites, basically each one with a different identity, each one with a different set of products and pricing, but it's all managed within Umbraco in one place, so they don't have to deal with multiple different platforms or anything like this. And this was actually one of the solutions, the type of solutions that we set out to support with Ucommerce right from the beginning. So it was a multi-store thing right from back in 2008 when we designed it, and continues to be that today. One other thing that's interesting is, the Umbraco's ability to do multiple websites and stores can also be used in a different way. So we've also seen it rolled out in a global way where, you have maybe a store that covers the US. It also covers the EU region as well as Asia Pacific. And the multi-store capability combined with a website within Umbraco actually enables a merchant to switch in and out stores for one single website. So rather than duplicating content and things like that, you can actually start to say, well, we have one identity, as you can see here, one website within Umbraco that is then powered by multiple stores within Ucommerce that each provide a different set of products, a different set of pricing, a different set of shipping rules, a different set of order management capabilities. All that is also something that Umbraco enables us to do. This one is my favorite. And it's the last one, I promise. I just wanted, I feel it's easier to sort of explain how it works with some examples. So this one is my favorite because it sells wine. Who doesn't like that? Especially in Corona times, right? We got to have something to entertain ourselves with, right? But the cool thing is that it's a sort of a full-blown e-commerce solution that does business to business, business to consumer, online and offline through a chain of retail stores. And it uses Ucommerce and Umbraco for all of it, which is super cool because at the end of the day, when they import wine from the southern regions of Europe, they bring back all these huge vats of wine, basically, that they sell either in bulk via their B2B channel, where the focus in Umbraco is basically to create solutions where you can, quick order and reorder and things like that. Whereas in the B2C solution, it's more about creating an experience for a customer to guide them towards the right wine, depending on their taste. And obviously, offline is all about supporting the retail stores as we go through that. So the really cool thing is that, at the end of the day, when you have Umbraco and Ucommerce sitting here supporting it, you just set up multiple websites, which incidentally can also be stores. You just manage all that in one central place, which is quite cool. All that is supported, of course, with the underlying platform that does catalogs, transactions, promotions, same as we've always done for 12 years now. So it's just a really quick intro to what Ucommerce is, to give you some context for the next two things that we're talking about. So Ucommerce 9 came out, and we had two key things that we wanted to do with the platform. We went out to our partners and we asked them, what do you like about Ucommerce? What don't you like? And we got back two very clear sort of responses. A, they were not super happy about our back office, the way that that's looked for a long, long time. And performance was an issue as well. So that is what we decided on focusing on fixing. And instead of talking about the KONDO too much, which is the new back office of Ucommerce, I'm just going to show you real quick. Of course, KONDO sits right here on the top of the platform, maintaining all the underlying information. And KONDO is interesting because it is our move towards a single page application, all done up in Vue. So it's super fast, super snappy, very responsive. I'm going to show you some examples of what it looks like. But one of the things, so back originally when we built Ucommerce, I'm a developer by heart. So UIs are not really my thing. We're not that great at it, to be honest. So one of the things we wanted to do was to set up some design principles for KONDO to make sure that we hit sort of a nice sort of middle ground between the CMS and the e-commerce solution. So we wanted to make sure that we create UIs that spark joy, basically, UIs that you want to use as a Ucommerce, as a user, as opposed to have to use. And I think Umbraco has hit that note quite nicely with Umbraco 8, that is, it's more fluid, it's more dynamic. We wanted to make sure that we sort of hit the same thing, not the same thing, but the same feel, I guess, of the platform. The second thing is that we wanted to make sure that our UIs are e-commerce first. So when Ucommerce was originally designed, what we did is we just took a look at Umbraco and thought, well, if we can get this as close to Umbraco as possible, that's great, because it means that everybody will, recognize the e-commerce platform, because it looks like Umbraco almost one-to-one. And we don't really have to invent a whole lot of stuff. We can just, look at what Umbraco did and make sure that we do the same thing in an e-commerce way. But it turns out that maintaining content and commerce are two quite different tasks, right? So when you're doing content, you tend to have less content nodes to work with, right? You don't have a million content nodes that you need to maintain one at a time. So the UI metaphors that are appropriate for dealing with content, tend to bring you closer towards, giving each piece of content more TLC, whereas e-commerce sort of tends to go the opposite direction, that it tends to be about really quickly dealing with a bunch of products rather than giving them a ton of TLC because there's just so many of them. So we wanted to make sure that we broke away a little bit from the CMS metaphors and just did something that was very, very appropriate for e-commerce. So we compromise a little bit in how close we can get to the CMS to make sure that we are as efficient as possible on the commerce side. The third design principle was that, I don't know about you, but you've probably been using IT systems for a long time, and I sort of get a sense when I use systems like that they're almost designed to trip us up. So we wanted to make sure that we created a system that would create confident users where you're not afraid of actually changing things and working with the system. And I'll show you how that actually what that looks like in a little bit. And then we wanted to focus in on experiences. So I'm gonna, rather than talking about it, let me show you what I mean. So we have an Umbraco 8 here, and Ucommerce is installed. And let's just take a look at what it is. So we get access to all the stuff that we have, and let's just take a look at one of the tools. This is the catalog builder. The idea here is that this particular area of Ucommerce is focused on building catalog structure and maintaining those. And one of the things that our user research told us was that these trees over here, because we have so much stuff in there, can be quite confusing. So we decided to actually move a lot of the structural navigation out of the hierarchies over here and move it into the middle of the screen. So you sort of have a better idea of what's going on and only focus on that one thing. So what we're looking at here are the stores within Ucommerce and the catalogs. And so we can navigate through the catalogs. And as you can see, we can do it really snappily here. And we do it in a sideways fashion, so we can sort of see more clearly where we actually are. And then we can sort of start scanning down. We can also use, so I look at my mouse, I'm going to put it over here. We can also use keyboard shortcuts. So you can just start navigating the catalog with my arrow keys. And that is because, this is a tool that as a user, you're going to be using this, hopefully, many hours a day. So it needs to be efficient. So I can navigate my catalog structures. I can start creating new categories and things like that just with the keyboard. One of the other things is Umbraco has always had these tabs, right? And they're sort of going away slightly. But we still felt that they were useful. So we actually moved them over here so we can still navigate between the various sections of the platform. But one of the things we found doing user research is that merchants really don't want to poke around to find stuff. They just want to scroll, basically. So we enable it so we can actually just go ahead and scroll, and notice over there to the left how these sections are just following along. So it's a little thing, but it's something that's directly inspired by the user feedback we got when we went out and asked people, hey, what do you want? Another thing, real quick here, is an example of lists within the platform. So in e-commerce, lists are incredibly important because everything is a list. When you're dealing with 1 million products within your backend or on a website, you can't really do anything but a list. So of course we went ahead and created a nice list that powers everything within Ucommerce. And one of the top requirements we had for it was basically the ability to customize the fields within the list. So whenever you create new fields for your products or new price groups, as we can see here, you can actually go in and say, well, I want to customize my personal list here, so I can see all my price points in different price lists. And of course, I can go ahead and reorder columns and things like that. Basic things that are something that everybody wants, and it's saved for me personally. So I don't I can just get back to this view as quickly as possible. Let's take a look at a product real quick. So one of the cool things about being integrated with Umbraco is that we can leverage the capabilities that Umbraco has. So login and all that good stuff, but also media, of course. So we can go ahead and just use the media items right from Umbraco. We're actually shipping a new version of this very soon with multi-pickup capability. Well, it is shipped actually. So it's just, it's just a great example of how Umbraco and Ucommerce work together to create that overall experience for the merchant and the customer. All right. The other thing that's really near and dear to my heart is the APIs of Ucommerce. And we wanted to make sure that we created a highly performant API that would push developers in the right direction. And Leonard there in the studio, who's been entertaining you today, has actually had a hand in the design of this API, because he is he is quite skilled into the stuff that we're going to talk about now. So we've actually relied on his expertise in part of the design process here. But to design Bolt, our new e-commerce API, we went ahead and spoke to partners, and they actually told us three things. They told us that we saw basically that every partner who was building high performance e-commerce solutions were basically using what we sort of termed as a search-driven architecture, basically sticking everything into a search engine and presenting every piece of information from that search API rather than using a SQL server or whatever. So that was the first thing. The second thing is that although everybody basically agreed that putting everything into a search engine is an ace idea, nobody could really agree on which search engine to put it into. So some have their preference for Lucene, some for Azure Search, some for Solar, Elasticsearch. There are a ton of them out there. So that was something that we had to sort of figure out how to deal with. And at the end of the day, the API needs to be efficient to work with for a dev, not just performant, but also easy to work out because, it's billable hours at the end of the day. And we don't really want to have those discussions with the client. Hey, what were you spending all your time on? So it was also very important that the API was efficient to use from a developer perspective. So we came up with a few design principles for Bolt. And the first one is obviously that it needed to be fast. I think that one is a given. Black Friday is the thing, right? Unified. So this is where we get into those billable hours. We didn't want developers actually looking for different APIs and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that full text search, faceted navigation, which are sort of key staples of e-commerce, as well as standard queries, were all unified into one go. We wanted to make sure that the API was safe by default. So, we previously had APIs that were very, very flexible. So you could do all sorts of things. They afforded you, a lot of opportunities for doing different things, but they also were fairly easy to sort of create a very slow solutions with. So we wanted to make sure that the APIs we provide are safe by default. They had to be scalable because e-commerce, right? And we wanted to make sure that the out-of-the-box experience with the APIs was great. So the out-of-the-box experience with Ucommerce is actually something that's very near and dear to myself, because I've worked with platforms that take 20 pages of Word document to set up, and it's a very, very poor experience. So we basically want to enable an experience where you install Ucommerce, you install Avenue Clothing on Umbraco, and you're good to go. And we wanted to make sure we didn't break that with the new API. And it needed to be pluggable so we could support the various search engines out there. So what we came up with is this overall design where basically we have the Ucommerce and Umbraco backend here. Everything is maintained as before within the UIs you saw. And then we index all the relevant information, all the product information, price points, all of it is indexed into search indexes over here, which have Bolt sitting on top, which is in turn powering the website. And the cool thing here is that once everything is moved out of the SQL server, you can just query Bolt, and you don't really need to talk to the SQL server until you start placing orders. And of course, in an e-commerce solution, the performance tends to be hit the hardest in the product pages. So catalogs and things like that are stored within the indexes. Now, we also needed to make it pluggable. So out of the box, we needed to support the out of the box experience, of course. So we needed to be installable. So we went with Lucene out of the box because it ships with Umbraco. It's right there. A lot of people know it. And but because it's a provider-based system, you can, in development, you can use a very simple setup for Lucene, or if you're only running on one server, you basically just use that one search index that you have. But if you need to scale for Black Friday or something like that, you can set up the Elasticsearch provider for Bolt that we're working on right now, and you can build your own as well using the framework first underpinnings of Ucommerce. And then when you're ready to deploy to production, you can simply just switch over to the new provider that will now be running on indexes in Elasticsearch, where you can scale out the API basically independently from the website and have multiple servers actually supporting the query APIs of the system. So that's basically the overall architecture, moving things from a flexible but slow data store into a less flexible but super fast data storage. That is the key. And remember, we had another requirement. We needed to create an API that was unified, right? It needed to support full text, facets, as well as queries. And so what we came up with is this. So you all know Link, I would guess, and we do too. And our APIs used to be link-based. And one of the things we found with Link is that it offers a lot of flexibility, but it's also a very leaky abstraction in the sense that, it's basically just translating in many cases directly back to SQL. And if you don't know what it translates to within the SQL database, you can very quickly end up with wonderful lazy load scenarios that will slow your system down, wonderful groups and things happening in database, things that happens in memory. You don't really know where it's going on unless you're sort of careful how you use it. So that's the bad part of Link. However, the good part of Link is that the syntax is very nice and clean. And so we wanted to sort of leave behind some of the flexibility, some of the things that we found that's tripped developers up, and then create our own query-based API. And this is what we came up with. The general idea is that you have these models here, search models, which you define yourself. So you basically say, here is a product, here is another type of product, here's a category, and Bolt will map up the information from the index into this model. So you can use a model or not use a model. It's completely up to you. Then we have the index itself, which stores various versions of what you need, and then the where clause here, which is where all the fun and interesting stuff happens. So we have support for your classic queries like finding a product in a category. We can match up values based on text, and we can do fuzzy matches. And one of the cool things here is this match class that we spent a lot of time actually talking about how we would create this API. And we wanted to create something that felt like Link, even though we had to sort of be able to specify arguments for the API, like fuzziness and boosting and things like that. So we came up with this little match class, which basically carries the additional capabilities that you need. So we saw some examples of these extension methods being hung off of strings and sort of types that you use all of the time, which means they pollute your namespace a little bit. But by having the match class and coupling everything to that, we don't pollute standard types within .NET with fuzzy and things like that. It just sits right here, and you can match on prices and things like that. Take a look down here. Skip and take. So we wanted it to be safe by default. So the first bit of that is that you actually move data from one data storage to the next. So you have to have an opinion on what you need on the front end. Everything is not available by default. You need to actually pick what you need. So you design the index ahead of time. So that's one example, right? The next one is that when you query our APIs, you have no ability to do joins and things like that. That's not a thing within this API. You have no ability to do groups. It doesn't happen on runtime. That happens on index time. And finally, down here, the API will only bring back so many products. So if you have, say, 1 million products in your product database and you don't specify skip and take, Ucommerce will bring back exactly 300, no more, no less, and unless you start skipping and taking. So we wanted developers to be explicit when they need more, right? So if you do need 1 million products, you can have the API produce it. You just have to say, take 1 million and it will do it. It will do it very slowly, but it will do it. So that's the API. I'm really happy about what we did here because I think we sort of nailed it in balancing out flexibility from Link and keeping something that looks familiar and sort of is intuitive to use for a .NET developer. Now, performance, we needed to be fast, right? So we wanted to make sure that we did data-driven development on these new APIs. And what you're looking at here is our performance dashboard that we use as we evolve these APIs. So over here to the left, you're looking at the various models that we were using. And we started out on model A here, which, as you can see, quite slow. We quickly moved to model B, which is just a different way of using the underlying search technology. So this is what we ended up shipping with. So we're able to, out of 500,000 products, to load around 1,000 products in something like 20 milliseconds, which is very, very snappy. So we have a fast API. We can also see how the API evolved over time. So you can see the model A was very unstable over time, so not quite so predictable as our model B here, which is sort of very, very stable over time. Now, because we are moving, the fastness of the API comes because the data store is a read fast data store, and we move stuff into it, right? So, but of course, there's a cost to that because we have introduced indexing time into the mix. So you can see here in Model B, it does take some time to move all that product from the database into the read fast storage, but it only happens one time, and no customers are waiting for it, right? Only here is where this happens millions of times during a day, right? So we really want to optimize on that. Whereas indexing and preparing data only happens, a couple of times a day, once an hour, something like that. So there is indexing time, of course. Also, there is a storage cost associated with it because we now have data sitting here and we have data sitting over here. And of course, we need to store those indexes somewhere. By default, they will be stored within your Umbraco instance. If you use the Lucene provider, this is exactly as you're used to with Umbraco. If you scale out the API on multiple servers, you will have the indexes on the server itself instead. Hope that makes sense. But really, the key here is that we've moved to an ASYNC versus real-time calculation model, where some calculations we prepare as much as we can here in advance, and then when the customer needs to see the results, we can just pick them out and display them. Real quick, because I'm running out of time here, we created a tool that enables you to do large catalogs, seed them. This is a .NET Core tool that generates catalogs of a certain size, so you can sort of try out these things yourself. So as you're developing e-commerce solutions, you can generate a catalog if you don't have that information available to make sure that the code you're creating is actually fast enough. And then the final thing I wanted to say, and I'm sorry I don't have a more up-to-date picture of my wonderful colleagues, is that of course technology is one thing, but at the end of the day, when you're buying into technology, into Umbraco, it's the community, it's the people that ultimately sort of means success or no within the project that you're doing. So just wanted to give a shout out to my wonderful colleagues here from our Christmas party. Product development, right? They've been busy building all this awesome stuff for you, but it cannot sit on its own. The UX department have gone out, collected feedback, and made sure that they sort of listened to our customers to make sure we could pull in as much feedback as possible. Our partner sales guys have been creating new partner programs, are really here to make sure that when partners go out and use Ucommerce, they are there to assist in the process and make sure that you have all the assistance you can. And most importantly is the customer success team that we established a year and a half ago, which is all about ensuring that when you're using Umbraco and Ucommerce, you have our support guys online to help you out, be a success with Umbraco and Ucommerce. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my colleague. A lot of stuff goes into building this thing, and I'm so happy to be able to work with these guys each and every day. And that is Ucommerce 9. I hope you enjoyed it.
And we're back. Thank you, Søren. Thank you for your very elaborate talk. But I think most people got very excited when you started talking about Bolt in this case. I think it's the most interesting part, at least for the technical guys looking right now. A lot of people got very interested in trying it out. We are a little short on time for the next, so I'm going to keep the questions short in this case. I had a few for them, but I'm just going to focus on the ones that actually came from the public. And one of the most important ones is how actually people can get started with Ucommerce, because obviously we're 9 versions ahead. There's a lot of stuff in there. How can new people get involved with Ucommerce in this case? How can you help them out?
There are different ways. So we have training, right? Like Umbraco has training. So it's possible to jump onto a training course and basically learn the ropes of the platform. We also have some open source projects, like the Seeder tool I showed you is open source, so you can play with that. The payment providers we have for Ucommerce, open source. So if you want to sort of get your hands dirty, that is a way. And if you just want to have a play with it, you can just download Ucommerce. It doesn't cost anything. Download it, install it, have a play, see if it's something that makes sense for you. Mm-hmm. And then, once you do, you can deploy it as well at no cost if you want. You can also, of course, deploy it at a cost if you want to, or use some of the bigger things.
Right. So we can actually check it out if it sparks joy for us in this case, to give it a Mary Kondo reference. Yeah. All right.